The moonlight caught something unnatural, a thin wire stretched taut between two trees, glinting like a predator's teeth. Above it, a metal canister dangled, its shadow swaying in the breeze, heavy with the promise of something deadly. I froze, my breath trapped in my chest, knowing one wrong step could end me right there in the heart of the Appalachian wilderness. 7 years ago, the mountains called to me and my dad. We'd planned a summer trek through a rugged stretch of the Appalachian Trail in northern Pennsylvania, a place where the earth feels ancient, its secrets buried deep in the roots of towering pines. The trail was familiar to us, a patchwork of memories from past hikes, but one section remained unconquered, a loose end from the previous year. That summer, we were determined to tie it up. I was in my mid-20s then, grappling with a rough patch in life, jobless, directionless, carrying a weight my dad could see in my slumped shoulders. He believed the trail would ground me, give me something to hold on to. The mountains don't judge, he'd say. They just test you. We set out at dawn, our boots crunching against the gravel path, the air sharp with the scent of damp moss and pine sap. The forest hummed with life birds flitting through the canopy, a distant stream gurgling like a heartbeat. But barely half an hour in, disaster struck. My dad, always the steady one, paused to help a young hiker navigate a jagged outcrop. His foot slipped, wedging itself in a crevice. He winced, his face tightening, but waved off my concern. It wasn't broken, but the swelling told us he couldn't go on. The trail ahead was too steep, too unforgiving for an injury. Halfway down the main path, a fork veered into an older, overgrown trail, a shadowed artery of the mountain few dared to tread. Stories lingered about that path, hikers vanishing, bodies found lifeless, their deaths unexplained. With my dad hurt, that route was out of the question. I wanted to turn back with him, but he wouldn't hear it. His eyes, usually so calm, burned with insistence. "You need this," he said, his voice low but firm. "Finish it for both of us." He knew how much the trail meant to me, not just as a hike but as a lifeline. My mental health had been fraying, and he saw this as my chance to stitch it back together. Against my better judgment, I agreed, promising to shorten the trip since I'd be alone. He limped back toward the trailhead, and I pressed forward, my pack heavy on my shoulders, my heart heavier still. The first day passed in a blur. I crossed paths with a few hikers, their voices a fleeting comfort in the vastness of the forest. One was an old childhood friend, his face lighting up with surprise as we traded stories under the dappled sunlight. But as the afternoon waned, a strange peace settled over me, the kind that only comes when you're alone with the wild. By 5 p.m., I reached the fork, the split between the safe, well-trodden trail and the forgotten path, its entrance choked with vines and shadows. The main trail was safe, mapped, predictable. The old path was raw, untamed, whispering of secrets the mountains kept hidden. I knew better than to stray from the main route, but I'd hiked enough trails to trust my instincts. The wilder path called to me, its beauty raw and unfiltered. Like a challenge I couldn't resist, I stepped onto the old trail, the ground soft beneath my boots, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. For 45 minutes I walked, the forest closing in around me, its silence broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The slope was steep, unsuitable for camping, so I pushed on until I found a flat clearing, a perfect spot to rest for the next 2 days. The view stole my breath, rolling ridges cloaked in green, the sky bruising purple as dusk crept in. I set up my tent, the canvas snapping taut in the evening breeze, and let the sounds of the forest lull me into a false sense of security. Birds sang their final notes, the wind sighed through the trees, and for a moment, I felt whole. But the descent the next day shattered that illusion. 2 days of hiking remained before I'd reach the main trail again, and the forest seemed to shift, its mood darkening. Halfway down the mountain, I stumbled across something that stopped me cold. A t-shirt, shredded and stained with dark crusted blood, draped over a branch like a grotesque offering. The fabric swayed gently, as if placed there to be seen, to warn or to lure. My pulse quickened, my eyes scanning the trees for movement. The wilderness wasn't new to me. I'd faced danger before. 3 years earlier, on the Pacific Crest Trail, a man had robbed me at knife point, his eyes wild with desperation. I'd learned to carry a gun after that, its weight a constant reminder of the line between safety and chaos. But this felt different. This wasn't random. I pressed on, my senses sharpened, the forest now an adversary rather than a refuge. The air grew heavy, the scent of pine mingling with something acrid, unplaceable. I found another spot to camp, more overgrown than I liked, but flat and shaded. I set up my tent, my hands moving mechanically, my mind racing. Before cooking, I scouted the area, a habit born from years of hiking. That's when I saw it, a tripwire, stretched low between 2 trees, nearly invisible at ankle height. The wire gleamed faintly in the sunlight, a spider's thread laced with malice. One tree bore strange carvings, jagged lines like a warning. I bent closer, my heart thudding, and saw the wire's purpose, a trap set to ensnare. I cut it with my knife, my hands trembling, and returned to camp, the forest silence now deafening. That's when I noticed my tent flap open. I'd zipped it shut, I was certain. My stomach dropped as I checked inside. My phone was gone. Someone had been here, close enough to touch my things, silent as a ghost. I grabbed my gun, its grip cold against my palm, and scanned the trees. The forest stared back unyielding. How had I not heard them? No footsteps, no rustle of fabric, nothing. Fear clawed at my chest, a primal urge to run warring with the need to stay calm. I tore down my camp, my movements frantic, and kept moving. The tripwire and missing phone, no coincidence. Night fell, but I couldn't stop. The thought of staying still vulnerable was unbearable. I hiked until midnight, my flashlight carving. A weak path through the darkness before pausing to eat and listen. The forest was still, too still, as if holding its breath. Exhausted, I set up my tent again, convincing myself I'd outrun whatever stalked me. I didn't sleep, just rested, my gun by my side. Dawn broke, gray and cold, and I stepped outside to boil water for breakfast. That's when I saw it. Another tripwire, stretched between 2 trees right in front of my tent. The wire glinted, mocking my escape, its presence a violation of the night I thought I'd survived. I'd walked that spot hours earlier, pissing near a mossy tree, and there'd been no wire then. Someone had set it while I slept, inches from where I lay. My knees buckled as I traced the wire's path, a makeshift pulley tied to a branch, leading to a 5-liter metal canister suspended above the trail. The air reeked of chemicals, sharp and biting, like battery acid. Movement flickered in the trees. A shadow, human but fleeting, watched me from the undergrowth. I lunged for my tent, my gun in hand, and fired a shot as the figure bolted, branches snapping in their wake. I didn't wait to see if I'd hit them. I grabbed what I could carry, pack, gun, water, and ran, adrenaline searing through my veins. The forest blurred around me, every step a gamble against unseen traps. The figure didn't pursue, but their absence was worse, as if they knew I'd never outrun their game. Hours later, I stumbled onto the main trail, my lungs burning, my body trembling. A family of hikers appeared, their normalcy jarring against my terror. They let me use their phone to call for help, their eyes wide as I recounted the traps. The figure, the acid. The authorities combed the trail, but found only my abandoned tent and the canister, its contents confirmed as battery acid, a nail tied to the wire served as a trigger step on it, and the acid would rain down, a homemade but lethal design. The precision chilled me, a predator's craft honed over years. No other traps were found, no suspect caught. I've since read of similar horrors on trails across the US, like Jane Sure, a Forest Service officer in Utah, who found tripwires rigged with rocks and sharpened sticks in 2012. The mountains hide people who see humans as prey, their traps a twisted sport. I haven't hiked since. The forest I once loved now feels like a living thing, watching, waiting. Every time I close my eyes, I see that wire, feel the acid's phantom burn, and wonder how many traps still lie hidden, waiting for the next fool to wander too far. The van was my sanctuary, my fortress against a world that had beaten me down since I was a child. 2 weeks ago, in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, that sanctuary became a trap, and I learned that even the places we call home can betray us in the dark. The air inside my van was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder of the West Virginia wilderness I'd come to explore. I'd parked on a dirt road beside a creek, the kind of place where the stars feel close enough to touch, and the silence wraps around you like a blanket. But that night, the silence broke, and what followed was a nightmare I can't shake. No matter how far I run, my life hadn't been kind. Growing up, home was a battlefield. My father's rage was a storm that never passed, his fists a constant threat. My mother, bless her, was a fragile shield, her love fierce but powerless against his fury. I can still see her standing between us, her voice trembling but resolute, the only thing keeping me from harm. When she died, I was 17, and the world I knew crumbled. Her absence was a wound that never healed, but it also woke me up. At 18, I faced my father, his eyes burning with the same hate I'd known all my life, and walked away. That day, I swore he'd never define me. The streets were my next teacher, cold and unforgiving. I slept in alleys, scavenged for scraps, and learned to trust no one. But then came a stranger, a volunteer with kind eyes and no reason to care. He saw something in me I didn't see myself and gave me an old van, rusted and battered but mine. It was more than shelter, it was hope, a chance to rebuild. Over 12 years, I fixed it up, each repair a step toward reclaiming my life. I found work, steadied myself, but the van remained my anchor, a symbol of the stranger's faith in me. When I got 14 days off, I knew where I'd go, the Appalachians, a place I'd dreamed of, where the mountains promised peace and solitude. Those first days were a balm for my soul. The van rumbled along winding roads, its familiar groans a comfort. I hiked trails where the air tasted clean, where the world felt vast and forgiving. One night I woke to a strange sound, a low wail mixed with something metallic, echoing from the peaks. It unnerved me, but I dismissed it as an animal, maybe a coyote caught in some forgotten machinery. The mountains were full of mysteries, and I wasn't here to solve them. I was here to breathe, to feel free. By the third night, I'd found the perfect spot in West Virginia, a dirt path near a creek where the water murmured like a lullaby. I'd eaten dinner beans and rice warmed over a camp stove and was sprawled inside the van, watching YouTube on my phone, the curtains drawn against the night. The van's interior was my world, a mattress in the back, shelves crammed with books and supplies, a photo of my mother taped to the wall, her smile a quiet strength. I was content, lulled by the creek song, until a new sound cut through it. It was a car engine, low and deliberate, accompanied by a high-pitched whistle, like air escaping a broken pipe. My heart stuttered. Out here, cars were rare, and drivers didn't linger. They sped through, chasing the next town. This one moved slowly, too slowly, its tires crunching gravel like it was searching for something. I froze, phone forgotten, my senses sharpening. The sound faded, and I exhaled, telling myself it was nothing, just a lost traveler. But less than 2 minutes later, it returned, louder, closer, turning onto my dirt road. Panic clawed at my chest. In cities, vans parked side by side were normal, but out here, with miles of empty forest, why choose my spot? I peered through. A gap in the curtain, the headlights casting harsh shadows across the van's walls. The engine idled, relentless, and the whistling grew sharper, a mechanical scream that set my teeth on edge. I waited, barely breathing, hoping they'd leave. But the lights stayed on, pinning me in place, and then silence. The engine cut off, and the darkness rushed in. Footsteps followed, heavy and uneven, crunching closer. A door opened, then another, and more steps joined the first. There were at least 2 of them, maybe more. My mind raced, replaying stories from other van dwellers. Never confront, stay quiet, pretend you're not there. I had no weapon, just a knife tucked in a drawer, useless against a group. A flashlight beam stabbed through the curtain, sweeping the van's interior, and I pressed myself against the floor, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Then came the sound that broke me, a sharp hiss, followed by a dull thud. My stomach dropped. They were slashing my tires, one by one, each puncture a death knell for my escape. The van, my home, my hope, was now a cage. Their intent was clear. They weren't here to steal. They wanted me. I curled tighter, memories of my father's violence flooding back, the helplessness I'd sworn never to feel again. But this was worse out here. No one would hear me scream. Another engine rumbled in the distance, tires grinding gravel. The men moved away, their voices low and urgent, drawn to the new arrival. This was my chance. I grabbed the knife, its handle cold and slick in my palm, and slid to the driver's seat. The door creaked as I opened it, and I winced, expecting shouts. None came. I stepped out, the night air biting my skin, and dropped to the ground, scrambling down a rocky ledge to the creek. The brush was thick, thorns tearing at my clothes, but I didn't care. I crouched low, the water's chill seeping through my shoes, and kept the van in sight. The second vehicle stopped, and 2 more men emerged, their silhouettes stark against the headlights. 4 total now. 2 carried baseball bats, their outlines menacing in the dim light. One held a knife, its blade glinting, and the 4th clutched. Something I couldn't make out, a crowbar, maybe, or worse. They circled the van, predators closing in, believing I was still inside. My breath hitched, relief warring with dread. They hadn't seen me, but how long until they realized I was gone? I crawled deeper into the brush, every rustle of the trail. My heart pounded, a drumbeat in my ears, and I felt exposed, the forest a vast, uncaring witness. When the first window shattered, the sound was a gunshot in the silence, and I ran. Branches whipped my face, roots snagged my feet, but I didn't stop. The night swallowed me, the van's destruction a distant echo. I ran until my lungs burned, until the world was a blur of pain and fear, stopping only to gasp for air, my throat raw, my mouth dry as dust. Hours passed, or maybe minutes' time lost meaning. The sun rose, painting the forest in sickly gray, and I was alone, the knife still clutched in my hand, my phone left behind in the van. Thirst clawed at me, stress stripping my body bare. I stumbled through the trees, directionless, until a car's hum reached me. I hid, terrified it was them, hunting me still. But it was a truck, its diesel growl distinct, and I staggered onto the road, waving frantically. The driver, a grizzled man with kind eyes, stopped. I poured out my story, words tumbling over each other, and he nodded, unsurprised. Happened here before, he said, his voice heavy. 15 years back, same kind of thing. My blood ran cold. Were these the same men, or was the forest a breeding ground for this evil? He drove me to safety, and the police took me back to the van. It was unrecognizable, windows smashed, walls gouged, my mother's photo torn and scattered. The sight broke me, a final violation of the life I built. I'm staying with a coworker now. The van abandoned, its wreckage a scar I can't face. The police confirmed similar attacks in the region, a pattern stretching decades, but no arrests, no answers. The mountains I loved betrayed me, and the van that saved me is gone. I'm looking for an apartment, a place with locks and neighbors, but the forest's shadow lingers. Every night, I hear that whistling engine, see those bats raised high, and wonder if they're still out there, waiting for someone else to call home. Every night, I close my eyes and see them, those footprints, small and wrong, circling where we slept, as if something out there was studying us, waiting. I'm not the kind who spooks easily. I've hiked trails across the southeast, faced down storms, bears, even a sketchy stranger or two. But what happened in the Great Smoky Mountains last April, in the spring of 2024, carved itself into my bones. It's not just a story. It's a weight I carry, a question I can't answer, and a fear that lingers in the quiet moments when the world feels still. My name doesn't matter here, but the names of my friends, Jared, Mark, Spencer, John, and the man we met, Ray. They do, because what we saw, what we felt, it's real. And it's out there, in those ancient woods, older than any map we trust. 6 years ago, I was a different man. Back in 2017, I was drifting, stuck in a job that numbed my soul, living for weekends that never felt long enough. That's when I stumbled into a Facebook group for hikers, a ragtag bunch of guys across Tennessee, the Carolinas, Virginia, all itching to trade pavement for dirt. You'd post a trail, see who bit, and meet up to chase the wild. That's how I found Jared, a quiet guy with a soldier's edge. Mark, who'd wake at the faintest rustle. Spencer, always cracking jokes to hide his nerves. And John, the planner, who mapped every step. We clicked, not just as hiking buddies but as brothers, who'd argue over the last spoonful of chili or share dreams under a sky thick with stars. We weren't kids anymore, past our 20s, and that kind of bond felt rare, like something you don't let slip away. For years, we talked about the Smoky Mountains. It was the holy grail of trails around here, a place where the earth feels alive, where ridges rise like the spine of some ancient beast. But life kept getting in the way. Work, weather, permits, excuses we stacked like firewood. Finally, last April, we made it happen. A 5-day trek through a section so remote, it didn't show up on tourist blogs or Pinterest boards. This was raw, untamed country, steep climbs, dense forests, shelters spaced so far apart you'd feel the world forget you. We wanted to disappear into those woods, to feel small, to come back changed. But we had no idea what was waiting. That Wednesday morning, frost crusted the grass at the trailhead, our breath clouding in the chill. Spring in the Smokies can trick you warm days, but nights that bite. We parked on a gravel road so rough. It felt like an old logging path, our cars rattling as we unloaded. The air was sharp, clean, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The first day was perfect. Sunlight sliced through budding trees, leaves crunched under our boots, and the quiet wrapped us like a blanket. By 6 p.m., we reached the first shelter, a 3-walled wooden shack, weathered but sturdy, perched on a rise with the sky burning orange behind it. We were laughing high on the trail when we saw him. Ray was already there, leaning against the shelter's frame, his tan coat frayed at the hems, a gray beard spilling over his chest like moss. His backpack looked older than us, patched and sagging, but his eyes were sharp, cutting through you like he knew more than he'd ever say. He was maybe mid-40s, though the lines on his face made him seem timeless, like he belonged to the mountains. "Name's Ray," he said, voice low, rough like gravel. When Jared asked what he was hunting, Ray's lips curled, but the smile never touched his eyes. "Not sure you'd believe me," he said, and we let it go, chuckling like he was just some eccentric trail hermit. We didn't care for hunting tailies, so we cooked our dehydrated meals, swapped stories, and settled in as a light drizzle tapped the roof. I slept better than I expected, the kind of deep rest you only get when the world's noise fades away. Morning broke, and I woke feeling good. The forest humming softly, birds calling through the mist. But then I saw Jared outside, standing still, staring at the ground like it held a secret he couldn't crack. His face was wrong, too pale, too tight. I stepped out, and my heart dropped. The earth around the shelter was scarred with footprints, dozens of them, small like a child's or a woman's, but the shapes were off. The toes stretched too long, almost like fingers, pressed deep into the wet mud. No trails led away, no signs of a fight, just these prints, circling us, relentless, as if something had paced around all night, watching us sleep. We woke the others, hoping for an explanation, maybe a sleepwalker among us, but everyone's socks were clean, boots still muddy from yesterday. Everyone except Ray. His boots were dry, impossibly clean, like he hadn't stepped a foot in the muck. He didn't flinch when he saw the prints, just glanced at them, then started packing. We pressed him, voices sharp with fear we didn't name. "Know anything about these?" Spencer asked. Ray paused, his eyes distant, like he was seeing something we couldn't. "That's why I'm here," he said, calm as death. "These mountains are older than you think." Then he shouldered his pack and walked off, following the prints into the trees. We stood frozen, the air heavy with questions no one dared ask. Who was he? What did he know? And why did his words feel like a warning we couldn't heed? We moved on, heading south, away from the prints, away from Ray. All day, we tossed theories, locals pulling a prank, some rare animal we didn't know. But the stories we'd grown up with, the ones about things in these mountains that weren't human, crept into our talk. By dusk, we were drained, our nerves raw, our laughter forced. We reached a new shelter, smaller, the wood creaking under us, and tried to convince ourselves we were safe. We were wrong. Morning came, and the rain had left fresh mud. More prints. More than before, 11 distinct sets, maybe more, circling tighter, closer, like whatever was out there was growing bolder. Mark, who'd always wake at the smallest sound, was near breaking. "How could I not hear them?" he kept saying, his voice thin. "It's like they floated." By the fourth night, we were wrecks. The storm hit hard, cold rain hammering the forest, the wind howling like a living thing. The shelter was a ruin, barely holding, its walls sagging like it hadn't been touched in decades. We rigged a tarp over the entrance, agreed to take shifts, no one trusting sleep. I took the early watch, 4:30 a.m., gun in hand, the storms. Chill seeping into my bones. The forest was black, the rain a dull roar, but through a slit in the tarp, I saw it movement. 7 figures stepped from the trees, frail, too small, human but not. They were naked, their skin pale as bone, untouched by the cold. Their limbs were wrung too long, knees bending backward, just enough to twist your stomach. They moved in. Slow, silent circles, studying the shelter, their eyes hollow, unblinking. I couldn't breathe. My hand shook on the gun, fear locking my joints, but something in me couldn't look away. What were they? I tapped Mark's leg, and he woke fast, his eyes wide. I shifted, let him peer through the gap, but his sleeping bag brushed the tarp. A faint rustle. Gone. They bolted, vanishing into the dark, faster than anything human, silent on the sodden ground. We sat there, hearts pounding, the silence thicker than the storm. What were those? Mark whispered, his voice barely holding. I had no answer, just relief that he'd seen them too, or I'd have thought I'd lost my mind. We woke the others, our words tumbling out, sounding insane even to us. But no one laughed. They knew, deep down, those prints weren't a prank. Those things weren't human. We packed and left at first light, the forest feeling alive, watching. We reported it to the rangers, but the one who took our story just nodded, his smile thin. Lots of stories in these woods. Most don't lead anywhere. His words chilled me more than the rain. I keep thinking about Ray, his calm, his certainty. He was hunting them, I'm sure of it. But why? They didn't attack us, didn't even approach. They just watched, curious, like we were the ones who didn't belong. And maybe we didn't single quotes T. every night. I see those prints, those eyes, those frail forms circling in the dark. I don't know what they were, but I know they're still out there, in the Smoky Mountains, waiting. And I know I'll never go back. The handprint on the glass glowed under the moonlight. Its fingers splayed like a spider clinging to the window. It wasn't there yesterday. Someone had stood outside, their breath fogging the pain, watching me sleep on the couch. My heart stopped, the house's silence roaring in my ears, as I realized I wasn't alone in the dark heart of Georgia's Appalachian foothills. 15 years ago, when I was 16, I lived in a sprawling farmhouse tucked into the wilds of Georgia, where the Appalachian mountains cast long shadows over fields and forests. Our home was a fortress of solitude, its nearest neighbor miles away, the backyard dissolving into a dense wall of pines that seemed to whisper secrets after dusk. I was a restless kid, caught between the urge to break free and the weight of a family that didn't quite understand me. My parents, busy with their lives, my dad a mechanic, my mom a nurse, often left me to my own devices. That weekend they'd taken my 8-year-old brother to visit a dance school for my sister, a prodigy whose talent outshone us all. The house was mine, a rare taste of freedom I craved, but one that would soon turn into a nightmare. I'd grown up around guns, a legacy from my mom's side, where every uncle and cousin knew how to handle a rifle before they could drive. My dad drilled 3 rules into me. Never react to noises in the woods, never open the door to strangers, and never, under any circumstances, go outside after dark. Simple, ironclad, born from a region where the forest held more than deer and raccoons. The air here always felt heavy, like the mountains were watching, judging every step you took. As a kid, I'd heard stories, neighbors whispering about lights flickering in the trees, voices calling names in the night. I laughed them off, but they lingered, a shadow in my mind. Friday night I locked every door and window, saving the living room's massive pane for last. It was the heart of the house, a wall of glass that flooded the room with sunlight by day, but turned into a black mirror at night. That evening, a new moon left the world cloaked in darkness, but a strange glow hung over the forest like the trees were exhaling light. It was beautiful and terrifying, a pull I couldn't resist. I planned to stay up late, gorging on pizza and video games, the hum of the PlayStation drowning out the quiet. I sprawled on the couch, the controller slick in my hands, the room warm with the scent of pepperoni and old wood. Hours blurred, and exhaustion tugged at my eyelids. I dozed off, the game's menu music looping softly. I woke at 4 a.m., my neck stiff, a prickling sensation crawling up my spine. Someone was watching me. The room was dark, the TV's glow casting jagged shadows across the walls. I sat up, my heart thudding, and glanced at the window. That's when I saw it. A handprint, stark against the glass, its outline sharp in the moonlight. The fingers were long, pressed hard enough to leave smudges, as if someone had leaned in, their face inches from mine. My breath caught, my mind scrambling for explanations. Maybe it was my dad's left days ago, but I knew better. The print was fresh, the edges crisp. I stumbled to the window, my legs unsteady, and yanked the blinds shut, the fabric rattling in my shaking hands. I locked my bedroom door, a flimsy barrier, and lay awake, the handprint burning in my mind, its presence a violation of the house's sanctity. Saturday dawned gray and heavy, the air thick with the promise of rain. I tried to shake off the night's terror, telling myself I'd imagined it. I called a friend from school, Jake, to come over, craving the normalcy of his laughter and our endless gaming marathons. He arrived around 2 p.m., his bike kicking up dust on the long driveway. We lost ourselves in pixelated battles, the house feeling alive again with our shouts and the clatter of soda cans. But as evening fell, a light drizzle pattered against the roof, and Jake headed home. I walked into the door, the damp air cool against my skin. That's when I saw them, 2 footprints in the soft earth outside, deep and deliberate, their edges sharp from the fresh rain. They hadn't been there when Jake arrived, and we hadn't stepped outside all day. My stomach twisted, the handprint flashing in my mind. I didn't tell Jake, not wanting to look weak, but the moment he left, I checked every lock, my hands slick with sweat. I grabbed the shotgun from my dad's closet, its weight both comforting and terrifying. I was 16, not a hero, but the gun made me feel less like prey. I sat in the living room, the weapon across my lap, every creak of the house amplified. The forest outside was silent, too silent, as if it knew something I didn't. I tried to focus on the TV, but my eyes kept darting to the windows, expecting another handprint, another sign of intrusion. As night deepened, I headed upstairs, the shotgun heavy in my arms. I'd barely reached the landing when I froze. A shadow stood motionless at the top of the stairs, tucked into the corner where I used to hide to scare my siblings. It was human-shaped, but wrong, too still, too tall, its edges blurred in the dim light. My heart slammed against my ribs, my mouth dry as sand. I gripped the gun, my finger hovering near the trigger, the weight of pulling it crashing over me. I couldn't shoot, not yet, not without knowing. But I couldn't stay, either. The shadow didn't move, but it felt alive, its gaze boring into me, stripping away my courage. I bolted for the kitchen, my socks slipping on the hardwood. The door to the garage was my only chance. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the gun. Behind me, the house was silent, no footsteps, no sound, but I felt it, a presence closing in. I slammed the garage door shut, buying seconds, and scrambled into my dad's old pickup. The keys were in the ignition, a habit he'd never broken. I turned them, the engine roaring to life, and floored it, the tires screeching as I burst through the garage door. In the rearview mirror, a figure stepped through the broken kitchen door, dressed in black, their face hidden in shadow. My vision blurred, my hands trembling on the wheel, the road a tunnel of darkness. I drove to Jake's house, the only place I could think of, my breath coming in ragged gasps. His dad called the cops, their flashing lights a jarring contrast to the night's terror. My parents rushed back, their faces pale with worry. The police searched the house, finding the kitchen door splintered, but nothing stolen. Nothing broken, except my sense of safety. On my bed, a single sheet of paper lay folded, its words scrawled in jagged ink. "Next time you won't be so lucky." The words seared into me, a promise of return, a threat that lingered in every shadow. We lived in that house for 6 more years, but I never spent another night alone. My parents installed alarms, cameras, new locks, but no technology could erase the handprint, the footprints, the shadow. Even now, in my Wisconsin apartment, thousands of miles away, I check the windows at night, my heart racing at every long shadow, convinced that figure is still out there waiting. The police never caught anyone, and the paper's words echo in my dreams, a reminder that some dangers don't end, they just wait. The rain was relentless that night, hammering the roof of our West Virginia home like it wanted to tear it apart. I was 13, alone and defiant, thinking I'd won by staying behind. But by the time I heard the floorboards groan upstairs, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. Someone was in the house with me, and they were hunting. The living room was dim, lit only by the flickering glow of the TV, its volume cranked to drown out the storm. Wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the trees in our backyard, a wall of forest that marked the edge of civilization, swayed like they were alive. I was sprawled on the couch, a bowl of popcorn forgotten on the table, my eyes heavy but my mind buzzing with the thrill of being alone. Just a week past my 13th birthday, I felt invincible, a kid who thought he could handle anything. That night, I learned how wrong I was. My family's house in West Virginia was a sanctuary, or so I believed. Growing up, I loved its quirks, the creaky stairs, the big windows that let in golden light, the way it smelled of cedar and my mom's baking. Our neighborhood was small, a cluster of homes dwarfed by the Appalachian wilderness, but it felt safe. Yet, whispers of trouble lingered. A year earlier, a 7-year-old boy vanished from a nearby town, snatched from his home while his family slept. The news shook our community, and my parents became stricter, never leaving me alone. Until that night. It started with a fight. I don't remember what sparked it, some petty disagreement about my mom's work party, but it escalated fast. My voice cracked with anger, theirs with hurt. I shouted that I wasn't going, that I was old enough to stay home. My mom, usually calm, snapped back, her eyes flashing. My dad slammed the door as they left, their car disappearing into the dusk. I stood in the quiet, chest heaving, proud of my rebellion. The house was mine, at least until dinner, I settled. In the living room, the TV blaring a sitcom I barely watched. Around 8:30, the storm hit, a beast of rain and wind that shook the walls. The trees outside danced wildly, their branches scraping the house like desperate fingers. I turned up the volume, trying to ignore the unease creeping in. At 9:10, the landline shrilled, startling me. It was my mom, her voice tight over the roar of rain on their car. A landslide had blocked the main road. They were stuck. She sounded worried, not just about the storm, but about me. Guilt softened my defiance, and I promised I was fine, that I'd check the windows and doors as she instructed. "Be safe," she said, and I heard the love beneath her fear. The storm's roar was louder upstairs, the air colder, biting through my hoodie. I checked the master bedroom, its windows rattling but secure, then moved to the bathroom. The window was wide open, rain pooling on the tile. My heart stuttered. "The wind," I told myself, though doubt gnawed at me. I slammed it shut, the latch, stiff but intact, and hurried downstairs, the TV's noise a frail comfort. I tried to focus, but the house felt different now, its warmth replaced by a chill that wasn't just the storm. At 9:45, the phone rang again. My parents said the police were clearing the road. They'd be home soon. I was about to hang up when a sound stopped me, a faint groan from upstairs, like a foot pressing on the old floorboards near my room. Our house was old, its wood warped by years of damp, and those creaks were familiar. But this was deliberate, a weight shifting where no one should be. I froze, phone still in hand, straining to hear. Another creak, then silence. My pulse raced, but I told myself it was the storm, a trick of pressure or wind. I sank onto the couch, eyes darting to the ceiling, praying for my parents' headlights. "There's something I haven't told you. I'm diabetic, diagnosed young. And I've learned to manage it. Check my blood sugar, inject insulin, stay calm. But stress can spike my levels, and I felt the warning signs. A dry mouth, a faint tremor. My supplies were upstairs, on my nightstand, the last place I wanted to go. I sat, debating, but the shaking grew worse. I had no choice. The stairs loomed like a gauntlet, each step a test of courage. Halfway up, the cold hit me again, sharper, and my eyes caught something, a trail of wet patches on the hallway floor, glinting in the dim light that my breath caught. When I'd closed the bathroom window, the floor was dry. Someone had been here, their shoes dripping from the storm. They'd been in the bathroom, maybe inches away, while I stood there, oblivious. The realization was a knife to my chest, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The hallway stretched before me, my room at one end, the bathroom at the other, its door now slightly ajar. I crept to my room, easing the door shut, cursing my parents' rule against locks. I grabbed my glucose meter, hands shaking as I pricked my finger. The reading was too high. I needed insulin. Now. Another creak, closer from the office. Next door. I snatched the insulin pen and syringe, my vision blurring with panic, and dove into the closet. It wasn't just a closet. When my parents remodeled, they'd left a partial wall, creating a hidden crawl space behind it. As a kid, I'd used it to hide from my cousins, a secret only I knew. I squeezed inside, pulling the crawl space door shut, the darkness swallowing me. My hands fumbled with the insulin, injecting it blindly, the needle's sting a distant pain compared to my terror. Footsteps entered my room, slow and deliberate. The floor groaned under their weight, each step a hammer to my nerves. They circled the bed, fabric rustling as they checked behind the curtains. They were looking for me, methodical, unhurried. I pressed my hands over my mouth, my breath hot and ragged, every muscle screaming to stay still. The closet door opened, clothes shifting as they pushed them aside. I was sure they'd find me, that the crawl space wouldn't hold. But after an endless pause, the footsteps retreated, and the bed creaked as they sat. I was trapped, a 13-year-old kid in a house that had turned against me. Memories flooded back, nights hiding under my bed as a child, fearing monsters, only to learn the real ones were outside. The storm raged, rain a relentless drumbeat, masking any chance of hearing help. Then, a new sound, tires on gravel, the hum of my parents' car. The intruder moved, the window sliding open, and footsteps hurried away. My mom's voice called my name, desperate, and I broke. Tears streamed down my face, sobs choking me, but I couldn't move, paralyzed by the teal. Fear they were still there. My parents found me, their voices frantic as they pulled me from the crawl space. I tried to explain, words tumbling out in gasps, but the panic drowned them. The police came, a kind woman asking questions I couldn't answer. They found no trace, no footprints, no forced entry, just the open window and my terror. A week later, my parents installed an alarm, and they never left me alone again. They said a man was arrested for nearby burglaries, but I knew it wasn't him. He'd had the chance to steal and didn't. He wanted me. 20-3 years later, I live in New York, far from those mountains. But when I visit my parents, step into that room, the fear returns. The crawl space is still there, a tomb for the kid I was. I lie awake, listening for creaks, seeing wet footprints in the dark. That night stole my home, my safety, and left a scar that time can't heal. Whoever was in that house wanted more than my things, and I'll never know why. Every time I shut my eyes, I see that hole deep, jagged, clawing into the earth like a wound that won't heal. My name is Liam, and for 30 years, I walked the Appalachian Trail as a park ranger. My boots treading paths where beauty and danger breathe as one. I've seen things, lost hikers, bear attacks, crimes that chill the blood, but nothing haunts me like that night, years ago, in a forgotten corner of those mountains. The silence that followed, the questions left unanswered, they're heavier than any pack I've ever carried. I'm retired now, but sleep still escapes me, because what I found in that forest wasn't just a crime scene. It was something older, something that doesn't belong in the light. The Appalachian Trail is a paradox. Its ridges rise like ancient bones, cloaked in forests so dense they swallow sound. It's breathtaking, moss soft underfoot, streams glinting like silver threads, peaks that make you feel small in the best way. But it's also a place where people vanish. More than most forests, this stretch I patrolled was infamous. Hikers went missing, their names fading into ranger logs. Crimes, when they happened, were brutal, carved into local memory like scars. You learn to stay sharp, eyes scanning every shadow, because out there, trouble didn't announce itself. It waited. That night, years back, the air was thick with dusk, the kind that presses against your skin. I was on patrol, my radio crackling with static when the call came. A couple had gone silent, their family frantic after weeks without contact. The woman had been found the day before, wandering a back road, her clothes torn, eyes vacant, words jumbled like she'd forgotten how to speak. She didn't even recall her husband, a man still missing, swallowed by the woods. My orders were clear: find their campsite, confirm it, call for backup. The family had rough coordinates, a rare stroke of luck, but as I set out, a knot tightened. In my gut, something was wrong out there, and you could feel it in the air. I hiked for 45 minutes, my flashlight cutting through the darkening forest. The trail was narrow, overgrown, roots snaking across the path like veins. At first, the sounds were normal crickets humming, leaves rustling in the breeze. But as I climbed higher, the noises shifted. A low, rhythmic scraping, too steady for an animal, too human for comfort. You know that moment when your instincts scream to turn back, but duty pulls you forward? That was me, step after step, the sound growing louder, pulling me toward a clearing I didn't want to see. When I broke through the trees, the sight stopped me cold. The campsite was a ruined tent half collapsed, food scattered like confetti, clothes shredded and strewn across the ground. It looked like a pack of wolves had torn through, but wolves don't leave chaos this deliberate. In the center, a man knelt, his hands plunging into the earth, digging a hole so deep it seemed he meant to bury himself. His clothes were rags, his fingers raw, blood mixing with mud as he clawed frantically, like an animal driven by some primal need. His face was hidden, but his movements were feverish, unhinged, and for a moment, I couldn't move. Who was he? What had done this to him? I should have called for backup right then, but shock rooted me. I stepped closer, my boots sinking into the soft earth, trying to make sense of the madness. "Hey," I called, voice steady but thin. He didn't look up, didn't pause, just kept digging, his breath ragged. I was 10 feet away when he turned, and his eyes, God, those eyes were empty, like the man inside had been hollowed out. Before I could react, he lunged, his fist slamming into my face. Pain exploded, my head snapped back, and the world went black as I hit the ground, a rock biting into my skull. When I came to, the pain was a living thing, pulsing through my head, blood trickling warm down my neck. The forest was pitch dark, the stars hidden by clouds, and the man was gone. My radio buzzed faintly, a lifeline I'd forgotten in the chaos. I fumbled for it, my hands shaking, and called for help. The team was already en route, alerted when my signal dropped. I staggered to my feet, the campsite looming around me, its silence heavier than the pain. It wasn't just quiet, it was wrong, like the forest was holding its breath. The tent was empty, its fabric sagging like a broken lung. Food rotted in the dirt, clothes lay in heaps, and everywhere, footprints bare, small, too many to count, pressed deep into the mud. They weren't his, not hers either. Both wore shoes when found, but these prints were different, scattered like a crowd had circled the camp, watching, waiting. I followed them, my flashlight trembling, until I heard it, a faint, shallow breathing, so soft it might have been the wind. It came from the hole, that gaping wound in the earth, and when I peered inside, my blood ran cold. He was there, curled tight at the bottom, motionless, like a child hiding from a nightmare. His chest rose and fell, barely proof he was alive. But his face was slack, eyes closed, blood caking his hands. The hole was massive, deeper than a grave, its walls jagged with roots he'd torn through. How long had he been digging, alone, with nothing but his hands? The ground was tough, thick with grass and stone, yet he'd carved this pit like it was his only purpose. I backed away, hiding in the trees, my heart pounding as I waited for backup. I couldn't face him alone, not after what he'd done. Not with those prints circling us. The team arrived, their lights piercing the dark, voices sharp with urgency. Getting him out was a fight. He woke thrashing, snarling, his eyes wild, like a beast trapped in a cage. It took 3 of us to restrain him, his strength unnatural, fueled by whatever had broken him. You could see it in his face, not just fear, but something deeper, something that had shattered his soul. They took him to the hospital, along with the woman, but the answers I expected never came. My superiors shut me down, their voices clipped. "Your job's done, Liam. Move on." But I couldn't. Among the rangers, whispers spread. Some said drugs, others toxic plants, or starvation-driven madness, but none of it fit. The woman, when she could speak, babbled about people from the forest, her words dismissed as delirium. Yet those footprints haunted me, too many, too deliberate, belonging to no one we found. And their wounds, deep gashes on their bodies, weren't self-inflicted. Someone or something had attacked them. I tried to dig deeper, contacting their families, but they'd closed ranks, refusing to talk. The official report mentioned none of it, no prints, no wounds, just a vague note about disorientation. 2 years later, in that same stretch of forest, 3 friends stumbled out, pale and shaking, claiming they'd been chased by a group in the woods. Their story was brushed off, labeled a prank, but I saw one of them, a kid no older than 20. His eyes held the same hollow terror I'd seen in that man's, the kind you can't fake. No one panics like that for attention. The investigation was a sham, buried before it started, and the news never touched it. I've spent years piecing it together, replaying that night, the hole, the prints, the silence. I don't have proof, only my gut, screaming that something's out there, hidden in those mountains, and no one wants it found. Every night, I see that hole, those prints, and I wonder what they saw, what broke them. The Appalachian Trail is beautiful, but it's old, older than us, and it holds secrets it doesn't share. You can walk those paths 100 times, but one night, you'll feel it, eyes in the dark, watching, waiting, and you'll know you're not alone. The window in the basement slid open, its frame groaning like a warning in the dead of night. I lay frozen in my bed, my heart pounding, knowing I'd locked it tight. 2 weeks earlier, my grandparents had died in the forest behind this house, their hearts stopping in the same shadowed glade. Now something or someone was slipping through the darkness, calling me toward the woods where they'd never returned. I was 13 when it happened, living in a creaking old house in the Appalachian foothills of Alabama, a place where the land felt alive, its secrets buried in the roots of ancient oaks. Our new home, inherited from my grandparents, sat alone on a hill, its backyard swallowed by a forest so dense it seemed to breathe at night. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky, guarding truths no one dared to uncover. My mom, a single parent since my dad's death when I was a baby, worked grueling shifts to keep us afloat. My brother, 4 years older, was always out with his friends, leaving me to navigate the house's eerie quiet alone. I hated it, the isolation, the way the forest loomed just beyond the fence, its shadows creeping closer after dusk. My grandparents' deaths haunted us. They'd both collapsed in the woods, months apart, their hearts failing in the same lonely spot. The official report called it coincidence, but the forest felt complicit, as if it had claimed them. My brother never bought the explanation. He'd spent weeks as a kid insisting there were creatures in those trees, pale, fleeting things that watched from the undergrowth. The school psychologist called it anxiety, and he stopped talking about it, but his fear lingered in my mind. A seed that took root in the silence of our new home. The house itself seemed to mourn, its walls groaning under the weight of their absence, its rooms too large, too empty. 2 weeks after we moved in, I found myself alone for the night. Mom was pulling a late shift at a bar, and my brother was at a party. I was used to it, but the house felt different now, its corners sharper, its shadows deeper. The air was thick, like the forest was pressing against the walls, waiting for me to make a mistake. I locked every door and window, a ritual that felt more like prayer than precaution. The house had 3 floors, built into the hill, with the basement level with the backyard's forest edge. Its sliding window recently replaced was the only modern thing in a structure that smelled of old wood and damp earth. I checked it twice, the lock clicking firmly into place. I settled into my bedroom on the second floor, a book in my hands, the lamplight casting a warm glow against the peeling wallpaper. The forest outside was silent, too silent, as if it knew something I didn't. I tried to focus on the pages, but my mind wandered to my grandparents, to the way my brother's eyes darkened when he spoke of the woods. As a kid, he'd told me a story that chilled me. One night, he'd seen a figure at the forest's edge, its limbs too long, its face featureless. He'd run inside, his breath ragged, swearing it had called his name. I'd laughed then, but now, alone in this house, the memory felt like a warning. Around 11 p.m., I heard it, a low scraping sound from the basement, like metal dragging against wood. My body went rigid, my book slipping from my hands, the sound echoing in my chest. It was the window, I was sure, but I'd locked it. I lay still, my breath shallow, straining to hear more. The house was quiet again, but the silence was worse, heavy with anticipation. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might betray me, announcing my fear to whatever was below. I told myself it was the wind, a branch, anything but what my gut screamed. Someone was in the house. Minutes dragged on, each one a test of my courage. I tried to read again, but the words blurred, my eyes darting to the doorknob. Then it came, a voice, soft but clear, calling my name from downstairs. It was my brother's voice, warm and familiar, but wrong, like a recording played through a broken speaker. My blood ran cold. He wasn't home. I called back, my voice trembling, but no answer came. I tried again, louder, desperation creeping in. Silence. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to move, to fall into its trap. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold against the floor, and crept to the door. The voice called again. Closer now, from the stairwell leading to the basement. It was coaxing, almost pleading. But it wasn't him. I knew it wasn't him. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand, its beam shaking in my hand. The hallway was dark, the air thick, with the scent of damp wood and something else earthy, like soil churned up after rain. The forest was inside, its presence seeping through the walls. I moved toward the stairs, each step deliberate, the flashlight's light carving a narrow path through the gloom. Halfway down to the basement, I saw it, the sliding window, wide open, its frame glinting under the faint moonlight. The lock was intact, but the glass was pushed aside, a gaping wound in the house's defenses. My stomach lurched, my mind racing. No one could have opened it from outside, not without breaking it. I froze, the flashlight trembling, its beam catching something in the corner of my eye. A shadow moved on the top floor, swift and silent, crossing the hallway like a predator, stalking its prey. My breath caught, my body screaming to run. I turned, the beam sweeping the stairs, and saw nothing, but I felt it, a presence, heavy and deliberate, watching from above. The voice called again, my brother's tone now laced with urgency, pulling me toward the basement. I knew it was a trick, a lure, but my legs moved anyway, drawn by some primal instinct I couldn't fight. I reached the basement, the air cold and damp, the smell of soil overwhelming. The open window loomed, a black void framed by moonlight. Something had come through, something that knew my name, that wore my brother's voice like a mask. I stepped closer, the flashlight shaking, when I heard footsteps behind me, fast, deliberate, descending the stairs. I spun, the beam catching. Nothing but empty air. The house was playing with me, its silence a weapon, its shadows alive. I didn't think I ran, my bare feet slapping against the concrete floor, and dove through the open window, the glass scraping my arms as I landed in the backyard. The forest loomed before me, its trees swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. Darkness was absolute, a living thing that swallowed sound and light. I sprinted across the yard, my lungs burning, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. Branches clawed at my face, roots snagged my feet, but I didn't stop. The voice called again, fainter now, mocking me from the house I'd fled. I crashed into something solid, my brother, his face pale with shock, flanked by two friends. They'd been cutting through the woods, a shortcut from the party. His eyes widened as I gasped out my story, my words tumbling over each other, incoherent. With fear, he grabbed my shoulders, his grip steady, and promised to check the house. I clung to him, the forest at my back, its presence a weight I couldn't shake. They searched every room, every corner, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. They found nothing, no footprints, no signs of entry, no trace of the shadow I'd seen. The window was still open, its lock untouched, a silent accusation of my panic. My brother tried to calm me, saying it was just a nightmare, but his eyes betrayed him. He didn't believe his own words. The house was too quiet, its floors too silent, as if it had swallowed the intruder whole. I never stayed alone in that house again. The forest became my enemy, its shadows a constant threat, its silence a lie. Years later I moved away, but the memory clings to me, sharp and unrelenting. Every night I check my locks, my windows, convinced that voice is still out there, waiting to call my name. The house stands empty now, its walls guarding secrets I'll never understand. What came through that window? Was it human or something older? Something the forest sent to claim me, as it had my grandparents? I don't know, and that's what terrifies me most. The forest in McDowell County, West Virginia, holds secrets that don't belong to the living. 43 years ago, my grandfather learned this when he found blood on his cabin window and followed a masked man through those woods. What he discovered was worse than any nightmare, a truth that monsters wear familiar faces and hunt in the places we call home. I never knew my grandfather to be a talkative man. His words were few, his hands calloused from years of tending a small wooden cabin deep in the Appalachian mountains. That cabin, passed down from his father, was his refuge, a place where the world's noise fell away, leaving only the murmur of trees and the pulse of the earth. But one summer, 43 years ago, that refuge turned into a battlefield, and the story he told me, rarely and only in whispers, changed how I see the people around me. McDowell County, in 1978, was a forgotten corner of the world. Its hills, cloaked in dense forest, its roads barely more than dirt tracks. The cabin sat miles from any neighbor, its weathered boards a testament to generations of care. My grandfather treated it like a living thing, every nail driven with purpose, every plank polished to a soft glow. That summer he was alone, my grandmother and young mother staying in town. He'd set out to renovate the attic, a cramped space he hoped to turn into storage. The work was grueling, patching walls, hauling insulation, battling a stubborn hole that refused his mortar. By dusk, exhaustion claimed him, and he collapsed on the couch, too tired to eat or shower. Sleep was never kind to him. Insomnia plagued his nights, weaving dreams that felt like warnings. That night, He dreamed of a figure at the window, small and broken, its head smeared with blood, pressing against the glass with a quiet, insistent tap. The image was vivid, too real, and when he woke at dawn, his heart was racing. He brushed it off as another nightmare, but unease lingered. He'd forgotten his nightly ritual, locking the door, securing the shutters, checking the windows. The cabin, his sanctuary, had been left vulnerable. Stepping outside for air, he froze. On the living room window, smeared in dried blood, were faint marks, handprints, too small for a man, too deliberate to be an accident. The dream rushed back, its details sharp. The bloodied figure, the tapping. His stomach twisted. Was it real? He grabbed his rifle, its weight a cold comfort, and scanned the forest's edge. In these hills, you didn't call the sheriff for every oddity. People settled scores here, debts, grudges, worse. Survival meant trusting your gut, and his was screaming. The forest was silent, its pines looming like sentinels. He'd grown up here, knew its unwritten rules. Don't walk after dark. Don't answer voices from the trees. Always carry protection. He'd followed them religiously, but now, with blood on his window, those rules felt like a prayer against a storm. He circled the cabin, eyes sharp for tracks, but found only dew-soaked grass. The air was heavy, the scent of moss and decay thick. He was about to turn back when a sound stopped him, a snap of branches, faint but deliberate, from the woods to his right. Instinct took over. He ducked into the underbrush, rifle ready, and pulled out his binoculars. Through the lenses, he saw a man tall, broad, moving with a hunter's grace. A crude mask, stitched from leather or sackcloth, hid his face, its uneven eye holes glinting. In the morning light, he held a rifle, not slung over his shoulder but pointed forward, like he was stalking prey. My grandfather's blood ran cold. This wasn't a hunter after game. Something about the mask, the posture, was wrong, predatory. Inhuman. He considered calling out, warning the man of his presence, but his gut held him back. The mask wasn't for warmth or sport. It was a disguise, a declaration. He lowered the binoculars, his hand steady despite the fear coiling in his chest. The man moved deeper into the forest, and my grandfather followed, driven by a need he couldn't name. The dream of the bloodied child haunted him, its image a thread pulling him forward. He kept low, matching the man's pace, every step silent. On the damp earth, time lost meaning in the forest's embrace, the trees closing in, their branches a lattice against the sky. He followed for what felt like hours, the man's figure a dark specter ahead. Then, abruptly, the man stopped, his body tensing. My grandfather froze, heart pounding, certain he'd been seen. But the man's gaze was fixed on the ground, where something moved low, barely visible, crawling through the brush. It was a boy, no older than 10, his clothes torn, his face streaked with mud and blood. He was weak, disoriented, dragging himself like a wounded animal. Without hesitation, my grandfather raised his rifle and fired, aiming for the man's leg. The shot echoed, birds scattering, and the man crumpled, clutching his thigh. My grandfather sprinted to the boy, who bolted at the sight of him, scrambling through the trees with a strength born of terror. He caught up, grabbing the boy's shoulders gently, feeling the tremble beneath his hands. "You're safe," he said, though his voice shook. The boy's eyes were wide, hollow, his bare feet bloodied from thorns and rocks. His clothes hung in shreds, stained with dirt and something darker blood. Not all his own. The boy collapsed, sobbing, and my grandfather wrapped him in a blanket, offering water from his canteen. They sat there, the forest watching, its silence oppressive. The boy's breathing slowed, his exhaustion winning, and my grandfather promised to check on the masked man. "1 minute," he said, leaving the boy curled against a tree. He returned to the spot, but the man was gone. A pool of blood marked the ground, alongside drag marks and 2 sets of footprints leading deeper into the woods. Someone had helped him escape, a second predator lurking unseen. Fear surged, but the boy was his priority. He carried him back to the cabin, the child's weight a reminder of his own daughter at home. Inside, he fired up the generator, heated soup, and watched the boy eat, his hands trembling. That night, when the boy slept, my grandfather hiked to the sheriff's office, the forest's eyes on his back. The boy was taken to a hospital, and whispers spread he'd escaped Old Fort, a home for troubled kids, where the trouble was with the men who ran it. The town knew more than it said. People avoided my grandfather's gaze, muttering about 2 men who'd always been off. One was the masked man, a local who'd helped my grandfather with a flat tire weeks before. Shared coffee, even invited him to hunt. He'd seemed kind, his smile warm, his laugh easy. The other was his shadow, a man rarely seen but always near. Police raided their homes, finding nothing but empty rooms, and at a garage trapdoor, 3 more masks screwed, stitched, stained. The discovery turned my grandfather's stomach, a rage he couldn't name. They vanished, like smoke in the wind. The woods were searched, the village scoured, but no trace remained. Rumors grew, bones found, hushed up, or just stories spun by fear. The police gave no answers, the case buried. My grandfather grew silent, his eyes distant. He told me once, years later, that the true horror wasn't the masks or the blood. It was knowing the monster had smiled at him, offered help, and hidden in plain sight. The boy was returned to the state, his fate unknown, and the cabin stands. Still, a monument to a truth we can't escape. The worst predators wear faces we trust. The bullet tore through my tent, and in that split second, I knew someone wanted me dead. 2 weeks ago, I was alone at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland, my heart pounding as I gripped my gun, the forest swallowing every hope of escape. I'm no hero, no master storyteller, just a guy who loves the wild, who thought a solo hike could quiet the noise of city life. But that night, in the black heart of the Appalachian Mountains, I learned a truth that still claws at me. The real monsters don't howl or haunt. They walk among us, their eyes cold, their hands steady, and they hunt in the dark. Deep Creek Lake is a place that feels like it's holding its breath. Far from Maryland's bustling towns, it's a world of dense forests where trees crowd so close the sunlight barely touches the ground. At dusk, the green fades to a near black, and outside tourist season, the silence is so heavy you can feel it pressing against your chest. I'd been there before, drawn to its raw beauty, its trails, that wind like veins through the mountains. This trip, I wanted solitude, a chance to breathe free from deadlines and crowded streets. You know that feeling, don't you? The need to vanish into nature, to let the world fall away. I packed light, parked at a northern trailhead, and felt alive as I stepped into the wild. But something was off from the start. The trailhead was empty, as it often is off-season. Yet a lone pickup truck sat there, its paint chipped, windows tinted dark. Inside, a man watched me, his cigarette glowing faintly, his face unreadable. I felt his stare, not curious but heavy, like a cold hand brushing my neck. You've felt eyes like that, haven't you? The kind that make your skin crawl? I busied myself, stuffing my backpack with gear from Walmart, food, water, a flashlight, trying to shake the unease. He stepped out, moving slow, deliberate, his boots crunching gravel. "Need help?" he asked, voice low, drawling. "Hiking." "The trail?" I forced a smile, lied about meeting friends already in the woods, my instincts screaming to keep him at a distance. He nodded, returned to his truck, and I stood there, heart racing, debating whether to drive away. But I rationalized maybe. He was just odd, not dangerous. I was bigger, stronger, and I had my gun. So I ignored the warning in my gut and started the hike. The first day was perfect. The trail wound through pines, their scent sharp and clean, the air cool against my skin. By the second day, I reached the lake, its water still as glass, reflecting. A sky bruised with clouds. I pitched my tent 100 yards from the shore, far enough for safety, close enough to hear the gentle lap of waves. This was why I came to feel the world slow down, to let the quiet sink into my bones. I'd forgotten the man in the truck, his stare fading like a bad dream. In my emergency bag, a habit born from too many cautionary tales, I carried a handgun. Knife, water filter, energy bars, meds, a crank flashlight, and a satellite SOS device. I'd never needed it, but its weight was a comfort, a reminder I was prepared. Thank God I had it that night. At 9 p.m., as I tended a small fire, I heard footsteps, faint but steady, somewhere beyond the trees. My pulse quickened, every sense sharp. In a place this remote, another person was unlikely, though not impossible. A bear, maybe? The steps stopped, and after minutes of silence, I returned to the fire, its glow a frail shield against the dark. By 11:30 p.m., the forest was a void, the moon's light weak, barely piercing the canopy. I zipped myself into the tent, the nylon walls my only barrier, and tried to sleep. But then they came again, footsteps, closer now, deliberate, circling. My heart slammed against my ribs, a primal fear flooding me, raw and paralyzing. I reached for my emergency bag, fingers fumbling for the gun, my breath shallow as the silence crushed me. The steps paused. Then something brushed the tent, dragging slow, deliberate, along the fabric. In the faint moonlight, a shadow moved, and I saw it, something metallic, glinting, scraping against the nylon. A gun. You know it when you see it, don't you? That cold certainty of death. Time froze, each second an eternity, my body locked in terror. Then a shot exploded, the bullet ripping through the tent, the sound deafening, the air burning. I felt the impact, a shockwave through my chest, but no pain. Was I hit? Adrenaline surged, instinct taking over. I fired back, my gun steady, the man's outline clear in the moonlight. He stumbled, a muffled grunt breaking the silence, and I knew I'd hit him. I tore the tent open, grabbed my bag, and ran. Branches clawed my face, roots snagged my boots, my lungs burning as I plunged through the dark. Run, survive, don't stop. My heart was a drum, threatening to burst, but I didn't look back. The forest was alive, its shadows shifting, every snap of a twig a threat. I tripped, fell hard, mud slick against my palms, but scrambled up, driven by a fear so raw it erased everything else. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing behind a tree, my breath ragged. I checked myself, no blood, no wounds, just scratches and bruises. Relief flooded me, but it was fleeting. I pulled out the SOS device, its red button a lifeline, and pressed it, praying help would come. As I waited, crouched in the dark, I remembered a story I'd heard years ago. A tale locals whispered about Deep Creek Lake. A hiker, alone like me, had vanished, his tent found shredded, blood staining the ground. They called it an animal attack, but the old-timers disagreed. Speaking of men who roamed these woods, not for game but for sport, was that man one of them? The one from the truck, his eyes so cold? The thought chilled me deeper than the night air, and I gripped my gun tighter, every rustle in the leaves a threat. Dawn broke, gray and cold, when the rescue team found me. Their faces were kind, their voices steady, but I saw the worry in their eyes as I told my story. The truck, the man, the gunshot, the chase. They took me to safety, and later, the police shared what they found. The pickup was still at the trailhead. Empty, reported stolen 3 months prior. My tent was a crime scene, its fabric torn, blood pooling at the entrance, splattered across the nylon. The man I'd shot had survived, they said, though they wouldn't say more. He's out there, isn't he, recovering, waiting? I'm back in the city now, but sleep is a stranger. Every night I hear those footsteps, see that glint of metal, feel the bullet's heat. I used to think the wild's dangers were bears or storms, or old ghost stories spun to scare campers. But I know better now. The real terror in these mountains wears a human face, carries a gun, and hunts in the silence. And the worst sound isn't a beast's roar or a branch snapping. It's the quiet click of a trigger, promising you won't wake up. The knocks came sharp and hollow, 3 deliberate raps against our front door at 2 a.m., slicing through the stillness of our Appalachian farmhouse. Outside, under the kitchen window, fresh footprints glistened in the moonlight, pressed deep into the damp earth boots I didn't recognize. My wife's hand tightened on my arm, her eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen. As we realized the night wasn't ours anymore. My name is Mark and my wife Sarah, and I have called these rugged Appalachian hills home our entire lives. Our farmhouse, a weathered sprawl of wood and stone, sits miles from the nearest neighbor, its fields swallowed by dense forests that hum with life by day and brood in silence by night. The land is part of us, its rhythms etched into our bones. But it demands respect, a lesson we learned the hard way. We chose this life for its freedom, for the way the mountains make you feel small yet whole. But that night, during harvest season, the land turned against us, or something in it did. We'd spent the evening at a neighbor's harvest party, a rare break from the grind of farm life. The air was thick with laughter, music, and the tang of homemade cider. The community came alive, bound by the land we all depended on, a warmth that lingered in our veins as we drove home. I had a few drinks, enough to feel loose but not reckless. Sarah, tipsier than usual, leaned against May, her giggles echoing in the truck's cab. I waited an hour before driving, the winding roads too familiar to risk. The curves of the forest road were mine, memorized like a prayer, but that night they felt narrower, the trees closer. Watching we pulled into the driveway at 2:05 a.m., the farmhouse dark against the moonlit hills. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil, a quiet that should have been comforting. We stumbled inside, still buzzing from the night, our laughter bouncing off the walls. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her hair spilling over the cushions, and I joined her, reluctant to let the joy fade. We talked, our voices soft, the room warm with the smell of wood smoke and cider on our breath. For a moment, the world was perfect, the farmhouse our fortress, untouchable. Then Sarah's Voice changed, sharp and sober. "Did you see that?" She pointed to the living room window, her face drained of color. I followed her gaze, but saw only the moon's cold light outlining the trees beyond. Her certainty unnerved me, a crack in the night's warmth. I shrugged, suggesting a deer, but she shook her head, her eyes fixed on the darkness. Something moved, Mark, unsure of it. She stood, crossing to the window, her silhouette tense against the glass. She insisted we lock everything: doors, windows, shutters. I humored her, but my pulse quickened. The house's silence now heavy with unease. In the kitchen. As I secured the shutters, I saw them. Footprints, fresh and deep, beneath the window. The tread matched my field boots, but I hadn't walked there in days, and these were larger, pressed with purpose. My breath caught, my hand lingering on the lock. Someone had stood here, watching us, their presence a violation of our home. I didn't tell Sarah, not wanting to fuel her fear, but my mind raced. The forest was too quiet, its usual chorus of crickets and owls gone, as if it knew a secret we didn't. I returned to her side, my calm a fragile mask, and we sat, the joy of the night replaced by a prickling dread. Then came the knocks, 3, slow and deliberate, from the front door. The sound was wrong, too loud, too intentional for 2 a.m. We froze, our eyes locking, the color draining from Sarah's face. No one comes unannounced, not here, not ever. The road to our gate is long, winding, impossible to traverse without a vehicle we'd hear. Yet someone was here, close enough to touch our door, silent until now. I stood, my legs unsteady, intending to ask who it was, but Sarah grabbed my arm, her whisper urgent. "Don't. They know we're here." She was right, we'd turned. On lights, laughed, moved through the house. They'd seen us, heard us, waited. I approached the door, my voice steady but tight. "Who's there?" A man answered, his tone calm but off, like he was reading a script. "I'm lost. Need help." He called himself Jimmy, claiming he lived nearby with his wife and daughter, scared and waiting in his car. The name was a Lay. I knew every soul in these hills, and there was no Jimmy. His voice nagged at me, familiar in a way I couldn't place, like a memory just out of reach. Years ago, a neighbor's barn had burned down, the fire blamed on strangers passing through. Whispers of grudges and retribution followed, but nothing was proven. I played along, asking him to wait while I grabbed a phone, but my gut screamed danger. Sarah ran to our bedroom, her footsteps soft but urgent, returning with our rifles. The weight of the gun grounded me, a cold promise of survival. I asked Jimmy if he wanted me to call the police. His reply was too quick, too sharp. "No need, just a phone. My daughter needs the bathroom." I pressed, asking to hear the girl, and his silence stretched, thick and telling. He faltered, admitting she wasn't with him, his story unraveling. The act was over. We both knew the other knew. His voice turned feral, a snarl that shattered the pretense. "Open the door, or I'll break it down." A gunshot exploded, the front door's glass splintering in a spray of shards. The sound was deafening, a violation that tore through our home. He screamed we were surrounded, that the police were an hour away, time enough for him to do whatever he wanted. He was right, and the truth of it chilled me. This wasn't a lone drifter. This was planned, a siege. Sarah's eyes met mine, her fear mirrored in my own, but her grip on the rifle was steady. We weren't going down without a fight. I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the basement. Our only chance was the passage an old tunnel from her grandparents' day, a secret route to the servants' quarters. It was cluttered, half forgotten, but it might buy us time. I told Sarah to clear the doorway while I grabbed more ammo, my movements frantic. Upstairs, windows shattered, the house groaning under the weight of intruders. It wasn't one or two, there were many, their footsteps heavy, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. I barricaded the bedroom door, buying seconds, and rejoined Sarah in the basement. The passage's wooden door, old but sturdy, locked behind us. A fragile shield against the chaos above. We crawled through the tunnel, the stone walls cold and slick, the air thick with dust and fear. Our breaths echoed, our hearts pounding loud enough to betray us. The passage opened to the servant's house, a crumbling relic untouched for decades. Through its windows, we saw flashlights dancing in the main house, at least 5 beams, maybe. More. The intruders moved like predators, methodical, tearing through our lives. We couldn't stay, we had to reach the forest, despite the rule we'd lived by: never enter the woods at night. The trees were our only cover, their darkness a gamble we had to take. We slipped into the forest, the undergrowth snagging our clothes, the air sharp with pine and fear. The trees closed around us, their branches a lattice against the moon, shielding us but trapping us too. Behind us, the front door gave way, its hinges screaming. We moved deeper, our steps careful, our rifles ready. The forest was alive, its silence a lie, its shadows shifting with every glance. We reached a neighbor's farm hours later, their porch light a beacon in the dark. They took us in, their kindness a lifeline, but the weight of what we'd lost pressed hard. The police came at dawn, their findings a gut punch. The house was a ruin, walls riddled with holes, furniture smashed, a fury I couldn't fathom. Footprints suggested at least 13 intruders, but no fingerprints, no clues, no arrests. The destruction was personal, a message written in broken glass and splintered wood. We stayed with neighbors for months, their warmth a balm, but the nightmares followed. I woke nightly, convinced I heard those knocks, my mind replaying Jimmy's voice, searching for its owner. I'd heard it before. I was sure maybe at a market, a church, a passing conversation, but no face matched the sound. Sarah tells me to let it go, that dwelling on it will destroy me. She's right, but the questions burn. Why us? What did we do to earn such hate? The house stands repaired now, but it's not home. Every shadow feels like an intruder, every knock a threat. I fear I'll never know who Jimmy was, or why he came. But worse, I fear he's still out there, waiting for the night we let our guard down again. The Appalachian Trail promised peace, a chance to lose myself in nature's embrace. But on the 4th night, when the whispers began, I learned that some places don't welcome the living. They speak, they call, and they take what you hold dear: your mind, your friends, your sanity. The forest was a cathedral of green, its canopy filtering sunlight into golden threads that danced on the trail. My boots crunched the earth, each step a rhythm I'd come to love since trading soccer fields for mountains. At 34, I was no stranger to lost my dreams of a sports career, shattered by a knee fracture, my identity unmoored for years. But hiking gave me purpose, a way to rebuild. In June 2023, with 3 friends, Jared, Caleb, and Mateo, I set out on the Appalachian Trail, chasing that peace. We didn't know the woods had other plans. My life hadn't always been about trails and tents. As a kid, I lived for soccer, the ball an extension of my soul. Scouts saw potential, whispered about scholarships, and I believed I'd make it big. Then came the injury, a crunch of bone, a scream, and months of pain. Physical therapy couldn't fix what was broken inside. For 2 years, I drifted, apathy my only companion, until Alicia, a college friend, pulled me back. She wasn't a lover, but a sister in spirit, her laughter a lifeline. She introduced me to hiking, and the mountains became my salvation, each step a stitch in my wounded self. Alicia's group faded when she married Mark, my best friend, and moved to Illinois. I hiked alone for a while, but solitude grew heavy. In 2017, I joined a Facebook group for hikers craving company and found my tribe. Jared, a former soldier scarred by war. Caleb, a New York stylist turned trail guide. And Mateo, a free spirit, juggling odd jobs. We were different, but bound by a love for nature's raw edges. Over 2 years, we tackled trails across the U.S., facing near robbers, strange drifters, even a stranger sleeping in Mateo's tent one dawn. Each scare taught us to be sharper, stronger. We thought we were ready for anything. The Appalachian Trail called us in early June, its paths less traveled, its secrets buried deep. We started late, hiking 2 hours before settling in a clearing. Near the main trail, not too isolated but far enough for quiet. The air was crisp, pine-scented, the sky a canvas of stars. We cooked over a fire, trading stories, our laughter echoing. Then, from the shadows, a man stumbled into our light. His eyes were vacant, his clothes torn, his voice a broken plea. "Make them stop," he mumbled, clutching his head. "The whispers, they won't leave me." We froze, our fire's warmth no match for the chill his words brought. He wasn't drunk, no alcohol on his breath, just shattered, like something had hollowed him out. Jared, ever the soldier, stepped forward, calm but alert. Caleb dialed for help, the signal faint but holding. The man rambled, repeating his plea, saying, the whispers began deep in the woods, relentless, driving him mad. We assumed mental illness, maybe drugs, but his fear was too raw, too real. Help arrived, taking him away, but sleep eluded us. His words lingered, a warning we didn't yet heed. The next 3 days were grueling but serene. My knee ached on. Steep climbs, but the trail's beauty, mossy rocks, babbling streams, eased my mind. We joked, shared snacks, and felt the world's weight lift. But the forest watched, its silence growing heavier, like a breath held too long. On the 4th night, we camped in another clearing, our tents a small fortress against the dark. Dinner was quick, exhaustion pulling us to sleep. I was out fast, dreaming of open fields, until Caleb's hand shook me awake. "Listen," he hissed, his face pale in the moonlight. I sat up groggy, and then it hit me, a chorus of whispers, low and ceaseless, circling our camp like an invisible tide. They weren't words, not exactly, but voices, human yet wrong, murmuring just beyond understanding. My skin prickled, my heart racing. "Jared's gone," Caleb said, his voice tight. His tent's empty. Panic surged. We stumbled out, finding Mateo already up, his gun aimed at the trees, his eyes wild. The whispers grew louder, a pressure in my skull, urging me to answer, to step into the dark. We knew the stories, Appalachian folklore about voices in the woods, entities that lured the unwary. Never respond, never stray alone. We clung to that rule, moving as one, our flashlights cutting through the night. The forest was a maze, its trees looming, their shadows twisting into shapes that weren't there. We called for Jared, our voices, swallowed by the whispers. Hours passed or minutes time warped, the trail looping like a nightmare. We found him at last, slumped against a tree, his face blank, his eyes distant. "It called me," he said, his voice hollow. "I had to." Follow, Jared, the soldier who'd faced death, was undone. He spoke of a voice, not his own, pulling him from his tent, guiding his steps. We dragged him back, his body heavy, his mind slipping. The whispers followed, relentless, burrowing into us. The return was impossible. Landmarks repeated, paths doubled back as if the forest refused to let us go. Jared mumbled nonsense, asking where we were, forgetting his own name. Dawn broke, gray and cold, and we stumbled into another camp, not ours. The hikers there, kind but wary, helped us call for rescue. When we checked, our camp was 200 meters away. Impossible, given the hours we'd walked, the circles we'd traced. Rescue found our tents untouched, our gear pristine, as if nothing had happened. But something had. The whispers stayed with us, a shadow in our minds. Jared recovered slowly, his sharpness dulled. Caleb couldn't sleep, his eyes haunted. Mateo, usually carefree, grew quiet. I searched for answers, scouring forums, chasing rumors of that man we'd helped. Was he a victim of the same force? The mountains hold their secrets tight, and I fear what lives there isn't human. I'll never hike that trail again, but the whispers follow, a reminder that some places aren't meant for us. It started with a sound low and wrong, like a pulse inside my skull, pulling me from sleep and refusing to let go. 3 nights ago, deep in the Appalachian backcountry, that sound found us 6 friends, lost in a forest that turned against us. My name doesn't matter, but there's due. Kyle, Marcus, Alyssa, Jessica, and 2 others whose faces I can't unsee. We thought we were ready for the wild, eager to vanish into its depths, but what we found wasn't just a trail. It was a presence, ancient and deliberate, that didn't hunt with claws or guns. It hunted our minds, stealing our sleep, unraveling us until we broke. And now, even safe at home, I hear it still, vibrating in the quiet, waiting. We were no strangers to the woods. For years, the 6 of us had bonded over backpacking trips, our nights filled with cheap beer and wild plans scribbled on napkins. We craved trails that tested us, paths where the world felt raw and real. This time, Kyle found a route not on park maps, shared on a hiker's forum for those who dared. It promised untouched ridges, Civil War ruins half swallowed by moss, and a week of solitude. You know that thrill, don't you? The pull of a place no one else knows? We ignored the red flags, its obscurity, the lack of markers, and packed light, driven by a need to prove we weren't just weekend campers with GPS apps and coolers. We wanted to feel small, to come back changed. The first day was everything we'd hoped. Sunlight cut through the treetops like golden blades, streams ran clear, their murmur soft against our boots' crunch. We laughed, traded leads, and made good time, the forest welcoming us with open arms. By sunset, we found a clearing, high, enough to dodge bugs, with a view that stole our breath, peaks rolling into the horizon, sky bleeding red. We pitched tents, passed a flask, and swapped college stories, our voices loud against the dusk. The moon rose, full and sharp, too bright to meet its gaze. Kyle, always the quiet one, stared at it, muttering, some places weren't made for us. We teased him, called him spooky, but his words lingered, a shadow we didn't yet feel. Day 2 deepened our plunge. Cell signal died. The forest closing in, trees thicker, air heavier with pine and earth. We crossed streams, climbed a rocky slope that had Marcus cursing, though his grin said he'd never quit. Alyssa, our artist, sketched in her notebook gnarled oaks, strange mushrooms glowing too vivid, like they belonged to another world. Near noon, she found a skeleton under a mossy log, tiny, perfect, as if laid out for us to see. What was it? A bird? A rodent? We couldn't tell, but its cleanliness unnerved us. Squirrel sacrifice, Jessica joked, and we laughed, moving on, but the image stuck. A crack in our confidence. The third night changed everything. As darkness fell, the forest went silent, not the quiet of night, but a deliberate absence, as if every bird, every breeze had been silenced by command. You've felt silence like that, haven't you? The kind that presses against your ears? In my tent, the air grew thick, heavy, like it was seeping through the nylon, wrapping around my chest. I lay still, eyes on the ceiling, a strange certainty growing. If I opened the flap, something would be there, watching, waiting. I didn't move, but sleep eluded me, the silence a living thing, coiling tighter. Half dozing, I heard it, a sound not outside but inside, a low hum that vibrated behind my eyes, cold and invasive. It wasn't a noise you hear, it was one you feel, digging into you, claiming you. I sat up, heart pounding, sure it wasn't my friends. I crawled to the tent's mesh window, my breath shallow, and peered into the dark. Between two trees, 20 feet out, eyes stared back, not animal, not glowing, but human-like, low to the ground, unblinking. Were they real? My pulse roared, but I told myself it was fatigue, a trick of the mind. Still, I unzipped the tent, stepped barefoot onto cold dirt, and moved toward them, phone in hand, no flashlight, driven by a need to prove it was nothing. 10 steps in, the sound came again, deeper, layered, not a growl or whisper, but a pressure, settling behind my eyes, crawling down my spine. It had weight, intent, as if it meant to burrow inside me and stay. I froze, shaking, not from cold, but from a fear I couldn't name. Something saw me, didn't it? Something knew I was there. I ran back, stumbling into camp, gasping, "There's something out there." My friends woke, groggy, their nervous laughs thin, accusing me of pranks or dreams. But their eyes betrayed them. No one slept after that. The camp's energy shifted, our pretense of safety crumbling. Day 4 was a nightmare. The silence followed us, oppressive, unbroken by birds or wind. We hiked with heads on swivels, glancing over shoulders, our banter forced, brittle. The woods didn't feel like woods anymore. They felt alive, watching. By night, we were wrecks, tents pitched in a new clearing, but the sound returned, just past midnight. It hit us all, a low vibrating wrong in every way, pulsing through our skulls, denying sleep. You couldn't close your eyes, it wouldn't let you. We sat up, eyes wide, breaths held, knowing it was real, close outside. No one spoke, but we felt it, a presence, deliberate, unraveling us. Marcus broke first. Midday, he collapsed, clutching his chest, face pale, gasping, heart attack. We laid him down, tried to calm him, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone. Alyssa and I climbed a ridge for signal, each step heavy, the silence suffocating. At the top, a single bar flickered, but before I could call, I saw it between two trunks. A figure, tall, still, faceless in the distance. It wasn't human. Was it? We ran, branches slashing our faces, nearly falling, fear choking us. Back at camp, we lied, said help was coming, hiding the truth to keep Marcus stable. To keep ourselves from spiraling. Rescue came 2 hours later, their voices a lifeline. At the hospital, they said Marcus had a panic attack, triggered by stress and no sleep. None of us had slept, not really, not for 2 nights. The sound haunted us, its echo lingering. Back home, I woke nightly, sweating, hearing it vibrate inside. Jessica landed in the ER after 4 sleepless nights, her eyes hollow. One by one, we unraveled, unable to admit what we'd felt wasn't just fear. That sound was made to break us, wasn't it? To keep us awake until we shattered. Years ago, I heard a tale about these mountains, whispered by an old ranger. He called it the forest that never sleeps, a place where something ancient lives. Not in flesh but in sound, feeding on your rest, your sanity. We weren't meant to be there, were we? I mocked those stories once, but now I know. What found? US didn't need to chase or kill. It just needed to wait, because without sleep, you're not human anymore. You're prey. The air turned cold, sharper than any summer night should be, as I stepped past the first trees of the Appalachian forest. My footsteps crunched softly on the leaves, but another sound echoed back fainter, deliberate, matching my pace perfectly. I stopped, my breath fogging in the moonlight, and the steps stopped too. Something was out there, mimicking me, waiting in the shadows of a place I was never meant to enter. 12 years ago, I traded the city's hum for the quiet of a small Appalachian town, a decision my wife Emma championed. We'd met in college, her roots deep in these mountains, while I was a city boy, used to neon lights and late-night runs through crowded streets. The move was supposed to ground us, a fresh start in a place where the stars burned brighter than street lamps. Our new home sat in a tiny village, a cluster of houses ringed by fields and forest, the nearest town a 20-minute drive. The mountains loomed like guardians, their peaks cloaked in mist, their secrets whispered in the wind. Emma warned me early on, the rules here were different. Respect the land, she'd say, her eyes serious, and never walk the woods at night. I laughed it off, my city arrogance dismissing her words as folklore. I loved the night, the way it stripped the world bare, leaving only you and your thoughts. Back in the city, I'd jog at midnight, the streets alive with possibility. Here, the darkness felt deeper, but I craved it still, a habit I couldn't shake. Emma called me reckless, half joking that she was too young to be a widow. Her warnings echoed her grandmother's stories, tales of hikers vanishing, of voices in the trees, of shadows that followed you home. I nodded, but my restlessness won out, a need to prove I wasn't bound by old fears. That night, we'd hosted old friends from Emma's childhood, a celebration of our new life. The house smelled of roasted meat and red wine, laughter filling the rooms like light. Emma drank more than usual, her cheeks flushed, her voice bright. She went to bed early, her steps unsteady, leaving me to clean the kitchen. The clock read 1 a.m., the house settling into silence, but I was wired, alive with a strange energy. I scrubbed dishes, the warm water grounding me, but my mind wandered to the world outside. The village felt like a ghost town after dark, its windows shuttered, its streets empty. I wanted to see it, to feel the mountain air, to claim this place as mine. I stepped onto the porch, the night air cool against my skin, the moon a pale sickle in the sky. The village was still, too still, as if it held its breath. I wore a t-shirt and jeans, my sneakers quiet on the gravel path. The walk to the forest's edge was short 5 minutes past the last house, where the road gave way to trees. I didn't plan to go far, just close enough to feel the wild, to taste the freedom I'd missed. The streetlights faded behind me, the darkness thickening, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. The forest stood like a wall, its branches swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. I paused at the edge, the trees towering, their shadows pooling at my feet. The night was quiet, unnaturally so, the usual hum of crickets and owls gone. I told myself I'd go a few steps, no more, just to see. Emma's voice echoed in my head. Never walk the woods at night. I pushed it aside, my pulse quickening. With defiance, I stepped past the first tree, the ground soft beneath my shoes, the air cooler than it should have been. The forest felt alive, its silence a lie, its presence pressing against me. I walked deeper, the moonlight filtering through the canopy, casting jagged patterns on the earth dot. Then it hit me, a chill, sharp and sudden, like stepping into a freezer. The air dropped, my breath fogging, my skin prickling despite the summer. Warmth. I froze, my t-shirt clinging to my back, my eyes scanning the trees. It wasn't right, not possible, but the cold was real, biting my fingers, numbing my face. I turned to head back, expecting the road, but saw only trees, their trunks endless, their branches a maze. I'd walked maybe 10 steps, no more, but the village was gone, swallowed by the forest. Panic flickered, my mind racing for explanations. A microclimate? A trick of the terrain? I pushed forward, my steps faster, the ground uneven beneath me. SF Og rose, thick and gray, curling around. The trees like smoke. It wasn't there moments ago, but now it choked the air, blurring the world beyond my reach. My breath came in shallow gasps, the fog tasting of earth and decay. I was lost, impossibly lost, in a forest I'd barely entered. I jogged, my sneakers slipping on roots, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. The fog thickened, a living thing, wrapping me in its grip. I stopped, my lungs burning, and listened. The silence was absolute, a void that swallowed sound. Then I heard it, footsteps, soft but deliberate, matching my own. I moved, they moved. I stopped, they stopped. My blood ran cold, my eyes straining through the fog. Hello? I called, my voice thin, swallowed by the trees. Nothing answered, but the footsteps resumed, closer now, their rhythm a mocking echo. I turned, my phone's flashlight trembling in my hand, its beam cutting through the mist. In the corner of my eye, a shadow stood, human-shaped but wrong, too tall, too still, its edges blurred like a smudge. I faced it, my heart slamming, but it didn't move. Its presence was heavy, a weight that pressed against my chest, stripping my courage. I didn't wait, I ran, my feet pounding the earth, branches clawing my arms, the fog a blindfold I couldn't tear off. The footsteps followed, relentless, their pace never faltering. My breath rasped, my legs burning, the cold air searing my lungs. I was a runner fit, but the forest fought me, its roots tripping, its branches grabbing. The shadow was behind me, I was sure, its gaze a blade in my back. I didn't look, couldn't look, terrified of what I'd see. A light flickered ahead, faint but real, the village's edge, its houses glowing through the fog. I sprinted, my body screaming, and burst onto the road, the pavement solid beneath me. I didn't stop, not until I was inside, the door locked. My back pressed against it, my breath coming in ragged sobs. I stood there, shaking, the house dark and silent. The cold clung to me, a phantom that wouldn't leave, seeping into my bones. I didn't wake Emma, didn't tell her, the shame too heavy. I'd been reckless, a fool, and the forest had punished me. I sat up all night, the flashlight in my hand, my eyes darting to the windows. What had followed me? A person? Something else? The town stories came back. Emma's grandmother whispering of lost hikers, of things in the woods that mimicked, that waited. Years ago, a neighbor's son had vanished, his boots found at the forest's edge, empty. I'd scoffed then, but now I believed. I never walked the woods at night again. The forest changed me, its lesson carved into my soul. I love this place. Its beauty, its quiet, but I respect it now, fear it. Every night, I check the locks, my heart racing at every gust of wind, convinced that cold is waiting, that shadow still standing just beyond the trees. I don't know what I saw, but I know. It saw me, and that's enough to keep me inside when the sun sets. The Appalachian Trail was supposed to be my escape, a solitary dance with nature's wild heart. 13 years ago, a man named Derek led me off that trail, into a trap that stole my arm, my peace, and nearly my life. The scars remain, but the questions burn deeper. Who were they, and why me? The forest air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, a balm for my restless soul as I hiked alone on the Appalachian Trail. My backpack was heavy, my boots worn, but each step felt like freedom. I was 32 then, a seasoned hiker chasing solitude after my best friend Scott couldn't join me. But solitude turned to terror when I trusted a stranger's words and fell into a pit that wasn't meant to let me go. Hiking was my lifeline, a passion Scott and I shared through years of trails from Maryland to the Pacific Crest. We'd planned this trip for months, dreaming of the Appalachians' rugged beauty, but fate intervened. The year before, Scott was floored by food poisoning, his hospital stay derailing our plans. We vowed to try again, but his promotion the next year chained him to work. "Go without me," he said, guilt in his eyes. I hesitated. Solo hiking wasn't my style, but the trail called, and I answered. I'd done enough treks to trust my skills, so I planned a 3-day hike, sticking to safer paths, saving the wilder ones for Scott's return. The first day was crowded, families and weekenders clogging the trail under Maryland's summer sun. I didn't mind. Their chatter was a reminder I wasn't truly alone. By dusk, the crowd thinned, and I paused for a snack, my back against a tree, the forest's quiet settling around me. That's when he appeared, Derek, he called himself, stepping from the shadows like he'd been waiting. His suit was crisp, his skin pale as moonlight, his smile too polished for the wilderness. He spoke of a hidden vista, a view so breathtaking it defined his years of hiking. It's not on any map, he said, his voice smooth, insistent. You can't miss it. Something about him was off, his clothes too clean, his words too rehearsed, like a salesman pitching a deal. I felt unease, a prickle at my neck, but his enthusiasm was infectious. He described the path precisely, a short detour, safe if followed exactly. Other routes are dangerous, he warned, his eyes lingering too long. I nodded, uneasy but curious, and he vanished down the trail, wishing me luck. That night, I camped off the path, my tent a small haven. The forest was calm, the stars bright, and I woke rested, Derek's words echoing. What if it was worth seeing? I set out early, following his directions, the trail narrowing, overgrown with weeds and thorns. The air grew heavy, the forest too quiet, no birds, no breeze. An hour in, I felt eyes on me, a sensation every hiker knows but dreads. I scanned the trees, saw nothing, and pushed on, irritation rising. The path was a lie, a tangle of roots and brambles, not the clear route Derek promised. Then the ground vanished. One step, solid earth. The next, nothing. I plummeted, my scream cut short as I slammed into damp soil, pain exploding in my arm. Darkness swallowed me, time blurring. When I came to, agony radiated from my right arm. A sharpened stake, carved by hand, pierced through flesh and muscle, pinning me like a specimen. Blood soaked my sleeve, the air sharp with iron. The pit was deep, its walls loose, leaves and branches arranged to hide it. This wasn't an accident, it was a trap, and Derek was the bait. My head throbbed, vision swimming, but panic sharpened my thoughts. His pale face, his scripted pitch, his insistence, it was a setup. I was prey. I tried to move, but the stake held fast, each twitch a fire in my nerves. The pit was too steep to climb, my shouts useless in the empty forest. Dizziness crept in, my strength fading when footsteps approached slow, deliberate. I froze, a trapped animal, as a black tarp fell over the pit, plunging me into darkness. A metallic clink followed, and gas hissed, acrid and choking. My lungs burned, my eyes stung, and the world dissolved. Fragments remain of those 9 days, shards of a nightmare I can't piece together. Faces loomed over me, hands prodding my eyes, my mouth, my skin. A woman's voice, tense and hurried, as she stitched my arm, her needle biting flesh. Her eyes held fear, or pity, or both. Bitter liquid forced down my throat, burning, gagging me. I saw rooms cold, sterile, lit by flickering bulbs, but they felt unreal, like memories stolen from someone else. I was examined, catalogued, a thing more than a man. The clearest memory is a car, its engine humming, the woman driving, her hands tight on the wheel. She glanced at me, her face a blur of urgency, and I felt her fear, or was it mine? The car stopped, a door opened, and I was pushed onto a roadside, the gravel biting my skin. Darkness again, then hospital lights, sterile and harsh. I woke, screaming, thrashing, certain I was still in that place, her needle in my arm. They sedated me, and when I calmed, the truth hit. 12.5 days had passed since the pit. A family found me on a Pennsylvania back road, miles from Allentown, my body bruised, my arm useless. The police listened, their faces grim as I described Derek, his suit, his pale skin, his lies. They searched, but found no trace, no path, no pit. My tent was gone, my gear vanished, as if I'd never been there. The woman who stitched me up? I see her in my mind, her eyes haunted, but words fail me. She saved me, I think, a victim or a rebel in that hell. But I'll never know. They called it human trafficking, said my injury made me worthless to them. It's a neat answer, but it doesn't fit the fragments, the clinical exams, the woman's fear, the precision of the trap. 13 years later, my arm hangs limp, a dead weight, and sleep is a battle. I see Derek smile, feel the stakes bite, hear her voice. Scott calls, urging me to move on, but the questions choke me. Who were they? Why me? The Appalachians hold their secrets, and I fear I'll die still asking. 3 knocks on my bedroom door sharp, deliberate, impossible tore through the silence of my locked house. My heart seized, breath freezing in my chest, because I live alone, deep in the Appalachian mountains, in a 200-year-old mansion that's become my cage. I'm a historian, a man tethered to reason, drawn to this decaying manor for its secrets. its stories carved in warped wood and shadowed halls. But 5 months after moving in, I'm drowning in dread, where knives vanish, scissors reappear, and something knows my every step. You've felt that terror, haven't you? The certainty you're not alone, even behind bolted doors? This house doesn't just hold history. It watches me, and the forest around it waits, patient and ancient, for me to join the others who vanished. My name doesn't matter, but my story does. I grew up in a small Ohio town, where old houses were my refuge, their creaking floors and dusty attics whispering tales of lives long gone. As a child, I'd lose myself in my grandmother's crumbling home, tracing faded wallpaper, imagining the people who'd laughed and wept there. That obsession carried me through years of study, into a career unearthing the buried secrets of powerful families, their triumphs, their downfalls, their ghosts. You know that pull, don't you? The need to uncover what time hides. 5 years ago, I found this mansion online, a steal at a price that seemed too good to be true. Tucked in a protected Appalachian forest, it was a historian's dream, 200 years of stories waiting to be told. I signed the papers, ignoring the confidentiality clause veiling its location, a detail I now see as a warning. With no family, a steady income, and a hunger for discovery, I thought it was fate. The mansion was a ruin when I arrived. Its walls sagged, paint peeled like dead skin, and windows stared blankly, clouded with grime. Yet it called to me, its Gothic arches and oak staircases promising secrets. Renovations were a nightmare. Crews came and went, some fleeing after a single day, others muttering about a heavy air before abandoning tools mid-job. They felt it, didn't they? That weight in the house? I dismissed it as superstition, small-town minds spooked by shadows. But when I moved in this year, the truth settled in my bones. Time stopped inside these walls. The air was thick, unmoving, like a held breath. Clocks ticked slower, their hands sluggish, as if the house refused to let the world move forward. Outside, the forest loomed, vast and black, its trees twisted like skeletal hands, their whispers birds, wind, leaves muffled, as if nature drew a line it wouldn't cross. The first oddity came in July, a month after I settled in. My kitchen knife, long and heavy, vanished. I tore through drawers, cursing my carelessness, blaming late nights poring over 19th century letters. Days later, I found it on my office bookshelf, glinting beside a letter opener I used for fragile documents. How did it get there? My stomach twisted, but I rationalized I'd carried it absent-mindedly, lost in work. The excuse felt hollow, yet I clung to it, unwilling to face the alternative. Then my scissors, kept on my nightstand for cutting archival tape, disappeared. I searched my bedroom, the air growing colder with each empty drawer, only to find them. A week later, by the upstairs bathroom sink, a room I rarely entered. Its mirror was fogged, tiles icy underfoot, and the scissors lay there, precise, as if placed by careful hands. Someone knew my habits, didn't they? These weren't accidents. The objects always appeared in rooms I avoided: dusty parlors, shadowed corridors, the attic with its locked trunks, as if taunting me, proving it saw where I went, where IDN single quotes D. Sleep became a battlefield. I'd wake at 3 a.m., heart pounding, certain a gaze rested on me. No footsteps, no open windows, just a weight in the air, like eyes boring through the dark. You felt that, haven't you? The prickle of being watched. I checked locks obsessively, doors bolted, windows sealed, but the fear grew, a parasite, feeding on my reason. Was someone slipping inside, moving things to scare me out? A scheme to crash the property value, force me to sell cheap? It was the only logical answer, but it faltered each night, as the house's silence pressed closer, its walls seeming to lean in, listening. The night of the knocks broke me. It was October, the forest outside skeletal under a sliver moon. I was in bed, every entry locked, a ritual I performed like a prayer. 3 knocks solid, purposeful rang through the house. My breath caught, body frozen, mind racing. Who was out there? The doors were barred, windows latched. I lay still, a child too scared to peek under the bed, my pulse a drum in my ears. The knocks didn't repeat, but the silence that followed was worse, heavy, alive, waiting. I fumbled for my phone, hands trembling, and called the police, my voice barely a whisper. They arrived an hour later, their flashlights cutting through the dark, searching every room, every corner. Nothing, no footprints, no forced entry, no trace. They pitied me, didn't they? My cheeks burned as I stood there, a rational man undone. But the knocks were real, and the house knew it. I fled to town days later, craving normalcy, bread, rice, human voices. At the grocery store, I spoke with Mr. Charles, an old man whose eyes held the town's secrets like a ledger. I mentioned my mansion on the hill, expecting a nod, a smile. His face changed, didn't it? He froze, apples slipping from his hands. His gaze heavy, not fear, but resignation, like he'd heard this tale too often. In a hushed voice, as if the air might listen, he told me the truth. Generations ago, every soul in that house vanished, leaving no trace, as if the earth swallowed them. Their heirs sold it fast, but new owners, scholars, dreamers, fools disappeared too, a cycle etched in blood. The house wasn't cursed, he said. The forest was. Built on land that belonged to something older, the mansion was an insult, and the trees held their grudge, their spirits ancient, patient, watching, waiting for intruders to claim. They never forget, do they? His words clawed into me, fitting every horror, the knife, the scissors, the knocks, the gaze. I drove back, head spinning, and sat on the porch, the forest staring back, its shadows shifting like lungs, breathing. My life's anchor logic, evidence shattered against what I felt. I'm a skeptic, a man of books and facts, but how do you fight what you can't see? You can't, can you? The house groaned around me, its floors creaking like laughter, its walls closing in. I found a diary in the attic last week, hidden in a trunk, its pages brittle, written by a woman who lived here in 1849. She spoke of moved objects, whispers in the night, a presence in the trees that called her name. Her final entry ended mid-sentence, the ink smudged, as if she'd been taken from the page. She was like me, wasn't she? I want to leave, to burn this place and run, but I can't sell it, not without warning the next soul. No price is worth this dread, this certainty that every shadow moves, every silence hums with intent. I'm alone, but not alone. The house my captor, the forest my judge. Last night, I woke to a knife on my pillow, its blade cold against my cheek. It's closer now, isn't it? I hear it in the quiet, a whisper older than time, calling me to join the vanished, to fade into the trees where no one will find me. The cry pierced the night, a low, anguished wail that echoed through the crumbling stone ruins of a forgotten town in the Great Smoky Mountains. My father and uncle froze, their flashlights trembling, as they approached the source, a man shirtless and filthy, gnawing at his own arm like a trapped animal. His eyes were empty, his body scarred, and the blood pooling around him wasn't all his own. That moment changed them forever, and their story haunts me still. My father rarely speaks of it, but a few days ago he sat me down, his voice heavy with a warning I couldn't ignore. He wanted me to understand why some places in these mountains should be left alone, why the Smoky Mountains hold secrets no one should seek. It happened 35 years ago when he and my uncle, both in their 20s, set out on an 8-day trek through the Great Smoky Mountains. They were young, restless, drawn to the wild like moths to a flame, chasing stories of a ghost town hidden in the forest. The town, whispered about by locals, was said to hum with strange noises at night, cries, murmurs, sounds that didn't belong. 2 months earlier, a man had vanished in that same area, his name fading from the news, his fate a mystery. My father and uncle, undeterred, mapped their route with care, their packs heavy with gear, their hearts light with adventure. The Smoky Mountains greeted them with beauty, their ridges cloaked in green, their streams glinting under spring sunlight. The forest was alive, its air thick with the scent of pine and damp moss, its trails a promise of discovery. The first days were calm, the kind of peace only the wild can offer. They camped under starry skies, their fire crackling, their laughter mingling with the calls of distant owls. The ruins fascinated them, crumbled foundations, broken walls, remnants of a life long gone. They sketched layouts, explored overgrown paths, and kept a respectful distance from the heart of the town, where the stories were darkest. An old woman at a grocery store had warned them. 2 centuries ago, a family was sacrificed there, their blood soaking the earth, cursing the land forever. They smiled, dismissing it as folklore, but the tale lingered, a shadow in their minds. On the 3rd night, my father woke in a sweat, his heart racing. He'd dreamed of eyes in the dark, countless pairs watching from beyond the firelight, their whispers brushing his ears. He shook it off, blaming the cold and the strange air of the mountains, but sleep didn't come easy after that. My uncle was quiet the next morning, his eyes shadowed, as if he'd seen the same dream. Neither spoke of it, but the forest felt different now, its calm a mask for something deeper. As they packed camp, they found footprints near their tent, fresh, bare, pressed deep into the soft earth. The tracks circled their sight, too close for comfort, too deliberate to be random. They weren't alone. Hikers passed through these trails, sure, but not at night, not barefoot, not without a trace. The discovery unsettled them, but they pressed on, their curiosity outweighing their fear. The ruins called, their stones whispering of secrets buried. In time, that afternoon, they reached the heart of the ghost town, its tallest structure still standing, its walls scarred by weather and neglect. The air was heavy, the scent of decay clinging to every breath. They set up camp nearby, their fire a small defiance against the growing dark. The forest was restless, its nighttime chorus of insects louder, sharper, like a warning. They ate. In silence, their eyes darting to the trees, the footprints, a weight they couldn't shake. As midnight approached, a sound cut through the night, a cry, low and pained, rising from the ruins. It wasn't an animal, not a wind, it was human, raw, full of despair. My father and uncle exchanged a glance, their flashlights snapping on, their hands tight on their knives. The cry came again, louder, pulling them toward the source. They moved cautiously, the stones crunching under their boots, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and something sharper, metallic. The ruins loomed, their shadows twisting in the flashlight beams, like a maze designed to trap. They followed the sound, their pulses racing, their breaths shallow in the cold mountain air. In a corner of the tallest ruin, they found him, a man, shirtless, his back to them, crouched in the dirt. His skin was filthy, streaked with mud and blood, his pants torn, soaked in dark stains. The cry was his, a keening wail that broke into sobs, then rose again, unending. He didn't see them, didn't hear them, lost in his own torment. My father stepped closer, his flashlight trembling, and saw it. The man was biting his arm, his teeth sinking into flesh, blood dripping onto the stone. His body was a map of pain scratches, bruises, burns, wounds old and new, as if he'd been hunted, tortured. The ground around him glistened, slick with blood, but not all of it was his. A darker pool spread nearby, its source unseen, its presence a scream of violence. My father's stomach churned, his mind racing. This was the missing man. It had to be the one the news had forgotten, left to rot in these mountains. My uncle grabbed his arm, pulling him back, his eyes wide with fear. The man was dangerous, not himself, a shell of what he'd been. They retreated, their steps silent, their flashlights dimmed to avoid his notice. The cry followed them, a sound aid. Never forget, a plea and a curse in one. They left food and water at the ruin's edge, a small act of mercy, and hiked down the mountain, their legs driven by adrenaline, their minds haunted by what they'd seen. They reached a ranger station by dawn, their stories spilling out in frantic bursts. The rangers listened, their faces grim, as if they'd heard this before. A search and rescue team was dispatched, their radios crackling with urgency. Hours later, they found him, barely alive, his body ravaged by dehydration and wounds. His arm was mauled, the flesh torn by his own teeth. But the blood in the ruin was worse. It belonged to someone else, a mystery no one could solve. The man was taken to a hospital, but he never recovered, his mind shattered, his nights filled with screams of a pursuer he couldn't name. His wife told my father he'd wake her, begging her to hide, convinced the man was coming. Whatever he'd seen, whatever he'd done, it broke him beyond repair. My father and uncle never returned to the Smoky Mountains. The forest changed them, its shadows clinging to their souls. My father grew quiet, his laughter rarer, his eyes distant when the mountains were mentioned. He told me this story to warn me, to teach me respect for places older than us, places that don't forgive. I've hiked other trails, but never those ruins. The story of that man, of the blood that wasn't his, haunts me, a puzzle with no answer. What happened in those 2 months? Was he alone, or was something else out there? Something that left its mark in blood and madness? I don't know, and the mountains aren't telling.